Welcome to this tutorial for Visual Macro. In this tutorial we will use the form we designed in tutorial number 1, to draw a flat blank in the Radan software. If you have not completed tutorial numbers 1 and number 2, then please go back, and complete those tutorials before commencing any further with this one. Let's start by explaining what we will be doing in this tutorial. I have the Radan software open, and it is showing the simple parametric part that we are going to draft. This part changes in its height and width, and it also has an array of holes at the top of the part. The symbol type for the array changes based upon what the user answers on our form. Drawing in Radan with Visual Macro is much like drawing a part with a pen and paper. If you can imagine what steps you go through when drawing, place the pen, draw a line with the pen, lift the pen off the paper and move it to a new location before drawing another line. So during this tutorial, think of the analogy of a pen and paper. The paper is our Radan canvas that we will move an imaginary pen around, drawing lines or inserting symbols on the pen's location. Okay, we will start here by inserting a corner symbol in this position. Notice the symbol's origin. Next we want to draw the bottom line, so we need to move the pen by 50 mm in the X direction. Once that is done we will draw a line in the X direction by a length specified by the user's answer to the width question. Then we will move the pen by 50 mm in the X direction and insert the corner symbol, this time in a mirrored state. Then move the pen by 50 mm in the Y direction and draw a line of length height, specified by the user. We will continue all of the way around the blank, before moving the pen to this position and inserting a symbol array. Okay, now start the Visual Macro application and go to the workbench environment, and then open the macro we built in tutorials 1 and 2. Right-click on one of the first 3 tree nodes, and select Add a Radan task. Now select the new Radan node and right-click. Now select Add new automation task. Your tree view should look like this. We can add as many automation tasks as we want under this Radan node. But for this tutorial we will only need one as we are only doing one drawing. Select the automation node, and notice its properties in the properties grid. You will recognize the conditional properties from tutorial number 2. Again, we can add rules to any of the Radan tree commands. For example, we could say, only do this task if the user has selected panel type 2 from our macro form, then this node would be ignored, along with any child nodes that live under this node. Next we move into the description property. We can change the text on the tree node, making your macro easier to understand if you wish to make changes in the future. Change the description property to My First Drawing. The next 2 properties set the Radan paper space and scale properties for our new drawing. For our drawing, leave these at the default setting. If you have the tooling license on your Radan installation, then you can enable tooling here. We will talk about this later in this tutorial. Okay, now that we have a new Radan automation task with its drawing properties defined, let's start drawing. Right-click on the new automation node, and select Symbols, Insert Symbol. Now take a look at this node's properties. Again, we can add a conditional rule for this command if we wish. Change the description property to lower left corner. Go to the symbol property and click the button. This is where we browse to the symbol we wish to insert. You can download the tutorial symbols from the link shown here. OK, select the symbol and save the macro. Now close the workbench and go to the macro browser and run your macro. The macro has connected to the Radan application and inserted the symbol that you selected. Next we wish to move the pen by 50 mm in the X direction and then draw a line. Go back to Visual Macro, and open the macro in the workbench. Now select the automation node and right-click. Select Pen Position, Move Pen. Now look at the Move Pen properties. We wish to move the pen by 50 mm in the X direction, and 0 mm in the Y direction. Select the X direction property and enter 50. Next we want to draw a line in the X direction by a length of the result of the width question. Select the automation node, right-click, select Drafting, Draw Line. Again take a look at its properties. Change the description to Bottom Line. Now select the X direction property and click the button to open the expression builder. Ensure that the expression is clear, and then browse to your width question and double-click to add it to the expression. Now click Finish. We will leave the Y direction property blank as we only want to draw a horizontal line. Next we could set the line type and color if we wished to. For our example we will leave these properties at their defaults. OK, save the macro and close the workbench, and if there is a Radan drawing open, start a new drawing. Open your macro and enter some valid answers and click OK. Your Radan drawing should look something like this. OK, close the drawing and return to the macro in the workbench environment. Now select the automation node, right-click, and select Pen Position, Move Pen. Again, type 50 in the X direction. Now repeat the steps for inserting a symbol, but this time change the mirror property to flip in the X direction. Now add a Move Pen node, and set its Y direction to 50 mm. Then add a Draw Line node, but this time set the property to draw in the Y direction by the value of height. Again, save and test the macro. Your drawing should look something like this. Go back to the macro in the workbench and select the automation node, right-click and add a Draw Line node. Now set the property to draw in the X direction by -width plus 100 like so. This value is the sum of the two Move Pen commands, and the width value. The value has a minus because we are drawing in a backwards direction. Next add another Draw Line node and set it to draw in the Y direction by -height. OK, save and test the macro. It should now look like this. If it does not, then check your properties in your drafting commands. OK, now we shall proceed to add the array. We are going to add two arrays, one for each panel type. So we will add a conditional rule to the arrays, so it will only insert the correct symbol array into the drawing. Before we can insert the array, we firstly need to move the pen from this position to a position roughly here. Now go back to the macro in the workbench environment. Now let's firstly move the pen ready for inserting the array. Add a Move Pen command node, and set the properties to move in the X direction by width divided by 2 plus 50 mm, and in the Y direction by height minus 35 mm. select the automation node and right-click, select Symbols, and then select Insert Symbol Array. Take a look at the properties. First let's set the conditional rule. We will first set the array for panel type 1. Select the panel types from the drop-down list in the input object. Then select is equal to for the condition, and then click the button in the input value property. Browse to the panel type choice list in the expression builder, and expand to see the available choices for that question. Double-click on the type 1 option, and click Finish. That's our condition rule set. Now let's look at the other properties. Select the symbol property, and click the button. Browse to the hex notch symbol. The next properties are for the array parameters. We want a single row array in the horizontal direction, so we can ignore the y direction properties. The property, array length x, is the total length of the array in the x direction. Select the property, and click the button to open the expression builder. Double-click on the width question, and set the expression to width -40. Click Finish and move to the symbol pitch x property. This is the pitch for each symbol along the array. We want a symbol every 75 mm, so enter 75. Next move to the array type property. We want our array to start at the pen position and work center outwards in the positive and minus direction, so select center outwards. If you are wondering what the difference is, the linear method starts at the pen position and works in one direction. Skipping forward a minute, you can see I have repeated the process, this time for if the user selects panel type 2. OK, save the macro and test your macro for both panel type selections. OK, now go back to the workbench. You remember that I mentioned the tooling functionality early on in the tutorial. If you enable tooling, then for each drafting command you can specify the tool name and the start and end tags in the command's properties. The only thing left to do is to add the save command to the Radan task. This will then save the drawing as a symbol to the active project. Select the automation node, and right-click, select Save to Project. Now set the file name in the Save command properties. You can also use the expression builder to create a bespoke file name at runtime. That's this tutorial completed. Now you should try experimenting with the different commands that are available. Thanks for watching.